There are some common backswing tendencies I see from recreational golfers all the time that are making their job on the downswing so much more difficult than it needs to be. And so we're going to talk about some of these tendencies today, but I want us to recognize, I know the backswing doesn't guarantee us anything, but man, it can make life so much easier on the way down if you're able to kind of get some variables in a good place. Now, I want you to recognize also that the average recreational player, the higher handicap golfer, they tend to fight a path that's a little bit more outside in or steep on the golf ball, and they tend to hit the ground a little bit more before the golf ball than the better player, right? The better player tends to come a little bit shallower into the ball, maybe a little bit more from the inside, and they also tend to hit the ground more after the ball. And so as handicaps get better or lower, well, the average strike tends to be a little bit more in front of the golf ball. And so if we can kind of operate under that assumption, how can I get my backswing in a position to help me do these things? Then I think we're off to a good start. Now, the first thing I'll see from in terms of backswing from players that maybe struggle a little bit is they have a little bit too much hip bump away from the target, and the timing of it is really the issue as well. And so typically what I'll see is this player will start their backswing, and then they'll get about right here, and they'll say, oh yeah, I got to shift my weight to my back foot. And now my momentum in the late stages of the backswing is moving away from the target. And so my mass is moving this way. And so if I recreate that, you can see the pelvis moving this way. Well, the downswing is only like 0.2 of a second, right? And so as I complete this move, you're going to see how easy it would be for me to keep my pressure and my weight on my back foot. And now it's going to be really hard for me to hit after the golf ball. The other thing it does from the down the line perspective is as I start to shift that pelvis back and start my downswing, you can see how easy it is for that hand path to want to kick more out in front of me. And now I'm going to be steep on the ball and fight even more of that outside in path. And so really this player is confusing when they should bump their hips and when they should turn their hips. And so what I like to have them do is I'll take an object, a golf bag, a pool noodle, anything, and I'll try to retrain how their pressure and how their turning really works. And so yes, there can be a little pressure bump to the trail side, but it has to happen much earlier. And so what I'll have this player feel is that for the first foot of the backswing, it's okay to bump into this bag. But then every movement of the club from here on out, our pelvis needs to be turning and moving toward the target. And so there's kind of this new programming going on where there's maybe a little pressure bump for the first foot, the club head moves. And then from here, we're going to start turning away from the bag, recentering and pushing all of our mass forward. Now from this position here, you can see how much easier it would be to get my my low point more in front of the ball. And then from down the line too, if I have that small bump and then I start turning away and I shift the pelvis forward, you can see how much easier it is to keep my hand path more behind me. If I can keep my hand path more behind me, well now all of a sudden I'm able to swing a little bit straighter into the ball and alleviate some of that outside in path. Now, pressure from a lateral standpoint is great, but I'll also see confusion on pressure from like a toe to heel kind of standpoint. And so what I'll typically see this player do if they struggle to turn, and I think turning is something that's, we talk about it a lot, but we need to understand the value of it. If I'm able to turn really well, I'm able to get my hands more behind me. I would say the average golfer doesn't get the hands behind them enough, and they actually end up kind of in this position here. And now from here, if I just make a normal downswing, well, the path on the club is going to be pretty steep, pretty outside in. And so what the player needs to understand is really how to load the trail heel a little bit better. If they can do that, they can actually turn more and get the hands more behind them. And so what I'll typically see from players that struggle is they might set up with an okay setup, but then in the backswing, they'll move the pressure into their trail toe. And so from this point here, like I can't turn any more than this. And as I rotate on the way down, you can see that path is going to be kicked more outside in. So what's the fix for this? Well, I have a tee, a simulator tee, and I like to put this under the player's trail toe and have them pretend it's worth like $10 million. And so now in the backswing, I'm going to ask this player, hey, when we get up to the top, I want you to almost feel like you're not touching that tee at all, and we can really feel the load in the trail hip there, and then you can really start to open up that trail hip and get kind of the belt buckle pointed back at the camera. As you can see, what that does for me is it really positions those hands to be further behind me, and I believe from this position here, it's going to be way easier to keep the club in a shallow position and move that path a little bit more from the inside. And so that pressure shift is a big deal. The other thing I'll see is the classic reverse pivot. And so if people don't know kind of what the reverse pivot means, what I'm referring to at least, is the position in the backswing where the hips are more away from the target than the chest. And so you can see here, my chest is like way in front of the golf ball or in front of my pelvis. And from here, I'm destined to basically, if you look from down the line, kick my hand path outward It's hard to turn from that position. So again, you can see as I do that, my hand path wants to kick super vertically up into the air. I don't have much of this depth. And now from here, it's going to be really easy to come over the top. So what's the fix? What's the fix for this player, right? Well, I like to have them take a stick and put it right between their feet and have it favor the trail foot, okay? So if this was the dead center of my stance, I would simply have the stick slightly more towards the trail side. Now the goal here is actually to take a club, put it across your shoulders, and we're gonna kind of train the chest movement here a little bit differently. We're gonna try and get the chest a little bit more over the trail foot, and we're gonna try and match this stick on the chest with the stick that's on the ground. And so if I do that, you can see my centeredness is a little bit better. My hips haven't slid away. My chest isn't leaning toward the target. I'm kind of in that standard, nice looking backswing position. And so in my opinion, this helps a couple things. One, it helps the player turn. And two, it helps the player achieve a little bit more hand depth. Again, you're seeing a theme here, right? The more we can achieve some hand depth, well, the easier it's going to be to swing a little bit more from the inside. And so I like these players to really feel what that feels like and then pay attention to the pelvis movement as well. If I slide that pelvis too much, man, it's really hard to get this stick to match up with the stick on the ground. If I keep the pelvis a little bit more centered and I rotate, well, now I can actually get this stick on my chest to match the stick on the ground. Now, if I did that classic reverse pivot, you're going to see how the stick on my chest is way in front of this, and I'm actually not able to rotate as much, and it puts a little pressure on the lower back. So those are some drills I got for you in terms of poor backswing mechanics that I tend to see. Thanks for watching this video. Online lessons are available as always.